Hi, today we're going to talk about neck making. This video is called Neck Making Highlights, and I'm not going to show you every step of building a neck, but I just want to show you how I do things in my shop, some of the highlights and the ways that I like to work. First, let's talk about making neck blanks. One thing you have to consider is what's available for lumber. A lot of people want to make the Vegas style neck blank with a center stripe, and so you have to consider what thickness of lumber you need to get the two pieces out. It's actually very close to the dimension of a so-called 6/4 board, but the problem is if you use a 6/4 board and you end up having to put it on the jointer to flatten it and then the thickness planer to get the right thickness, you'll end up removing probably more material than you expect. I'll show you a case in point. I actually made this neck blank with 6/4 lumber, and I discovered I was just under the dimension that I like. What I like to do is I like to work with a 1.75, I meant to say 2.75 dimension with the center stripe in there. And I do that because my whole strategy is to get a three-piece neck that I can use my template on and not have to use what they call ears. In other words, I don't want to have to extend the width of the board just to accommodate the peg head, if I can help it. So this one came out just under, and I'm going to have to use ears to build it out to use my peg head template. In the same run, I decided, well, I'll just use an 1/8 inch center stripe, and I may use this for some project down the road, but it just shows you that when you try to conserve on lumber, you end up getting into trouble. So, and another thing is a lot of people like to take their template and they like to draw the actual profile of the neck out and then fit two pieces kind of within each other on a board, and maybe to save lumber, I don't know. But anyway, I find that if you're going to make something as complex as a banjo neck, it's better to just pay for the lumber. This here is 8/4, and it's kind of sad in a way to have to use an 8/4 piece of lumber to get down to the dimension that you use for a three-piece neck. But as I keep saying, you know, it's just a lot easier to deal with. So I make square blanks. I don't try to, you know, make a pre-profile any pieces before I put them together. It's just that the geometry works out so you have more control in the steps down the line that I'll show you. And another thing is, you know, if I have a nice piece of lumber, I don't pay particular attention to the way the grain is going and all that stuff. And, you know, I may say some things during these videos that horrify other builders, but you know, this is the way I do things, is working for me. This material here is from Luthier's Mercantile. It's a kind of a fiber. It's not really wood, but it's really great when you're doing a three-piece neck, because if you've ever worked with veneers, as I have, when you spread the glue on a veneer, it tends to curl incredibly much and makes it difficult to get everything together. So here's an example of a three-piece neck. I got my fiber material. I like the thick stuff that they sell. And so it goes like that in a sandwich, and you glue it up. There's nothing terribly difficult about gluing up a neck blank, but I'll just show you how I do it, and I think I've got a time-saving tip for you. Okay, I'm about to glue up my neck blank. There's two basic types of clamps I like to use, the C-clamp and the not C-clamp. I don't know what kind of clamp you call this, but anyway, it slides on the bar and it's kind of convenient. This kind is nice to start with because it doesn't cause as much movement with the pieces of wood in relation to each other, which I'll show you right now. This black material is that fiber stuff that I get from LMI. I like it a lot. As I mentioned before, veneers tend to curl up, and this stuff doesn't. You always want to wet both surfaces with glue, because if you have any dry spots, that's a potential cause of trouble. This is just a coffee stirring stick that I'm using to spread the glue. I always use yellow glue. It's got the perfect setup time. It's been around for decades, and you know, unless someone can prove me wrong, I think it's a very good glue to use for all sorts of banjo making applications. Now, I think I said before by mistake that my neck blanks end up at 1.75. I meant to say 2.75. And also, that is for width I'm talking. And I make them 30 inches long, which is overkill. But again, it's just convenient, and you don't have to worry about your dimensions as much when you make it 30 inches. And also, when I glue it up, you'll see that the wood moves around a little bit. The glue acts like a lubricant almost. And there's ways to avoid the movement by, you know, drilling and pinning the pieces and then putting them together with the pins so they don't move. But I just like to do things the easiest way I can. I guess I'm lazy that way, but. So I start with this type of clamp. As I said, it seems like I can get it to go on without the wood moving too much. And I don't, you'll see it shifted that way. And the reason it shifts is because the clamp is not completely 90 degrees. And so I'm not quite happy with that. So let me, there, okay. Now I don't clamp it down really hard. What I do is first I just get 3 clamps to just sort of hold the place with mild pressure. And it's going to move a little bit anyway, but not so much that it's going to be unusable. Then I go in with the C-clamps for the second step. C-clamps tend to make the wood move around a lot. And again, sort of a mild pressure. And what happens is after you get several clamps on, they sort of average each other out or cancel each other out with the movement, and then you can start tightening after you get a few clamps on. And after that, the wood doesn't seem to move very much. And as I said, one way to approach this, I could pick a spot on the blank that I know is going to get cut out, and I could have drilled through it and put pins or screws or who knows what. But to me, that's just stuff I can avoid, so I do. All right, I've got a whole bunch of clamps on now. Now I can go back and start tightening, and I can see that it's pretty stable now. It's not moving hardly at all. And seeing the glue squeeze out is very important. It means you've got a good seal all the way through. And that's about it. This is the neck blank I glued up, and I trimmed it off so it's looking nice. And I want to talk a little bit about the various stages of building a neck. And so for instance, here's the stage after I put the fingerboard on. I've got the side profile, I've got the top profile mostly done, peg head's blank. Here's a neck a little bit further down the line. I began shaping it and got the peg head all shaped. And here's one that's already got some frets on it. This one's pretty well shaped. The only thing I have to do now is trim off the heel cap, and this is almost ready for finishing. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the geometry of a neck. Here's one tool I use to shape the side profile. I use a shaper table. I'm going to actually show you how I do that later. But one thing I want to talk about is the geometry of a neck means from the volute to the heel, this is a straight line. And without some kind of guide, it's difficult to establish that straight line, and once you do, you never want to violate that, because you can imagine that if you have a neck and this is wavy, that's just no good. It's got to be straight. And one thing I wanted to tell you about that I've run into problems many times to warn you of is that when you're shaping this part of the heel, it's very easy to dig too much right in this area here, and then you end up with a scoop, and then you have to go and flatten the whole neck again. There's ways to flatten it without the router table, but the easiest way is with the router table. In fact, I built this area up here a little bit extra so that when I do my shaping, I won't have that problem. One thing I wanted to add is that no matter what tools you use to get to this stage, the final shaping, at least for me, is done with a file, a flat file, and sometimes the round part of the file. What I'm trying to say here is that you can have all the fancy power tools in the world, but when it comes time to blend all the shapes, it really has to be done by hand. Unless you have some kind of fancy CNC equipment, but most of us don't have that. And also I wanted you to imagine the complexity of blending all the curves on a banjo neck. You have a concave shape here, you have a convex shape here, you have a convex shape here. This here is convex until you get to here, and then there's a slight concavity, and it has to blend into this part here. So really, once you get past this stage here, it's almost like being a sculptor. So I want you to think of yourself as a sculptor making a beautiful shape based on what I like to call the geometry that you set up before. In other words, a straight line here, obviously a straight line here, and the profile and so forth. All of these things have to be accurate, but then when it comes time to actually shape it, it's all by hand, and blending all the shapes is really one of the hard parts of building a banjo, especially this area here and this area here. The nice thing about doing it by hand is that while you're working, you can feel it. You can feel, if it feels nice, if it feels natural. You can decide on whether you want a sort of a V shape or what they call a C shape. And here I want to just add another plug for handmade banjos, because in Asia, they make their necks now by CNC. You can buy really accurate CNC necks here in America. The inlays are done by CNC, but to me, those necks can sometimes lack the human touch. Even a perfect CNC inlay job, to me, looks a little bit cold and mechanical compared to the slight imperfections of the handmade inlay. I'm done ranting now. Let's carry on.